Hi, my name is JD and this is my channel Frost and Forest. And today I am just going to be doing a classic declutter video. As I've talked about in my other declutter video, it's not so much that I have a certain number of decks that I'm trying to keep. It's more that I have a certain amount of space that I am trying to fit my decks into. And so while I'm continuing to bring new decks in, I'm also trying to carefully examine the decks that I'm maybe not using, that I'm maybe not resonating with, and then passing those along to folks who would maybe like them better. And so this month I have a few more decks that I am considering passing along. The other thing I mentioned in my last declutter video is that part of my process of deciding if I'm going to keep a deck or not includes putting the deck back into order. I do that for two reasons. One, I think it lets me spend some time with the deck and touch it, look at the cards carefully, just kind of, have some time to examine the deck. And also, when I pass the deck on to somebody else, I like to have the deck in order so it feels more like they're starting with a clean slate. So yeah, I have some decks that I'm going to share with you today that are decks that I'm thinking about passing along and having them leave my collection. So the first deck that I'm thinking about passing along is the Anna K Tarot. This deck I got second hand. It was used when I got it. I actually traded it for some other things. And I got it after it had gone out of print. This is the mass market version of it. And I had some stuff that the person who I traded with was looking for, and I kind of, had a little bit of panic about it's going out of print. What if I want it? And so this is a good lesson that if you didn't want it before it went out of print, you maybe don't want it after it goes out of print as well. But, it wasn't a trade, and I was happy to part with the things that I traded for. So in the end, no harm, no foul. But I spent some time working with this deck in, it would have been earlier this winter because we haven't been having a lot of snow. And I tried using it and it didn't work for me. I wasn't connecting with the readings. I don't know. It didn't click. I also think part of the issue is that I am not a huge fan of the color yellow. And this deck has a lot of very vibrant yellow in it. And so I think that might be also a sign that, this is just not the deck for me. And it does make it a little trickier because it is out of print. And so it would be harder to get my hands on it again if I decide I want it. But I feel pretty clear now that it is not a deck that I want to keep. Another thing I like to do when I'm thinking about rehoming a deck is also think about the other decks that I have that might kind of fit the same slot. And the first thing that came to mind for me is the Green Witch. The Green Witch is one of my very favorite decks. And it does have this kind of magical world vibe. See, cards like this are what is going to make me miss it. I do like this winter feeling and the birch trees in it. That is something in particular I like. But, at the end of the day, if I'm looking for something that feels like community and has a lot of people celebrating and living life together, I am probably going to choose the Green Witch over something like the Anna K. It didn't work for me. And it's hard because there are some really beautiful cards in the Anna K, but when I tried to use it, it just didn't work. And so I think while I have the Green Witch, I am okay passing along the Anna K Tarot. Okay, so the next deck I'm thinking about passing along is the Deviant Moon Tarot. This is a deck that I've had for a while. I like it. I haven't really been able to let it go, but I also don't use it that much. And it is very tall. It's a very tall deck, and so I have a really hard time shuffling this deck. And so because of that, I decided to try out the mini one. So you can kind of see there's quite a difference there. But so it's kind of more exchanging a deck than really getting rid of a deck, but the mini is much smaller. I'm not quite ready to let this deck go. And I'm hoping that if I have a mini version that is easier for me to shuffle, I will use it more, because I do really like the art. And I like the sort of different perspective that this deck takes on the cards. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that I do tend to like mini decks just because my hands are small. And so if I have the option of having a mini deck versus a deck that is too big and hard for me to shuffle, I'm going to choose the mini deck. And so because of that, I feel comfortable moving the larger deck along and keeping the mini one to try out for a while. And this is also a mass market deck, so if I really wanted to repurchase it, I could. I just say that because it helps take the stress off a little bit. I actually don't rebuy decks that often, but that just, you know, it's a consideration when I'm thinking about if I'm rehoming a deck or not. And so, yeah, I think the Deviant Moon larger edition can go to a different home. So the next couple decks I'm going to show you are decks that I am thinking about rehoming, but as I was considering rehoming them, I realized that I never really gave them a chance. I never really used them very often. And so for the next two decks leading up to this video, I spent about a week, maybe a little more, working with each of these decks to see if I like them or not. And so the first one that I was considering rehoming is the Flow Tarot. And so this is a beautiful deck. It is, I think it's stock images, but it's photographs. It's very beautiful. And I didn't really think of myself as the kind of person who liked decks that were stock imagey like this or photographing the real world. But I saw this deck and it was for a good price used, and I thought I would give it a try. I had found another photographic deck that I liked just right before this, so I was like, maybe I should give this one a try. And so I got it, and then for months it just kind of sat on my shelf. I got it, I put it away right away. And so, you know, it sat for a while, and then I was deciding if I was going to rehome it. And so I pulled it out and I decided I should actually try to use it. And when I started using it, I realized I really liked it. I really liked the pictures. They're beautiful. I really liked the keywords that are on the keywords that are on the deck. I liked the guidebook, and the kind of saying that's at the end of each guidebook entry that kind of sums up the card. In general, I just like the experience. I also am able to shuffle it, which is a good thing for me. And so I decided that there was a lot of positives to this deck. And here we are, the other reason why I really like it is I like that the swords suit is winter, and I don't have a lot of decks that depict winter this way. And so in the end, after I did this, and even now kind of looking through it as I'm going through it with you, I don't think I can let this deck go. I think I just kind of set it on a shelf and didn't really use it. But now that I've used it, I love this Queen of Swords. Or, yeah, Queen of Snow. I'm a sucker for cards that have the Northern Lights in them. And so, yeah, I don't think I can let this deck go. I like it a lot. So this one, you know, I thought about getting rid of it, but I'm keeping it. Okay, so the next deck that I am thinking about passing along is the Unfinished Business Tarot. This is the first edition, and I got this deck when it first came out. I pre-ordered it. And at the time, you know, I've really been getting into kind of ghosty things, so I thought I would really like it. And I used it a couple of times, and then I just put it on a shelf, and I didn't bring myself, you know, I just wasn't using it. And so it sat, and it sat. And again, you know, I'm thinking about space. So as I'm looking at my decks and thinking about which ones am I using, which ones am I not using, you know, it kind of occurred to me that I don't actually use this deck. And so I really thought that this would be a deck that I would love and that I would be using a lot more. And so again, because I hadn't used it a ton, I decided that I would try to use it for a week. So I do daily draws with it and get to know the deck a little bit better, get to know the guidebook a little bit better. And so I did that, and that kind of cemented it for me that this is maybe not the deck for me. And the thing I'll say is that the stories in this guidebook about these ghosts and these people are very vivid, and they're very good stories. It was well thought out by the creator, but it also ends with a lot of people passing away unexpectedly. And that is just not the kind of thing that I want to go to a deck for a lot. And I realized as I was starting to use it, because of the unexpected death theme of this deck, I was kind of avoiding using this deck. And if I'm avoiding using a deck, it means that it's probably not the deck for me. And so I think that I am ready to pass on my Unfinished Business deck. You know, it is a deck that goes in and out of print. If I really decided I wanted it, I could probably get it at some point in the future, but I'm not sure I will. The art is beautiful, and but like this card, I pulled this card, and this card was hard. It was heartbreaking. I mean, I know that makes sense because it's the Three of Swords, but I can't always handle that level of heartbreaking when I'm using a deck. So yeah, this one is not for me. But yeah, so I'll be passing it along. So after going through this process, I decided that I was going to keep 3 decks. Oops. And, oh no, sorry. I decided I was going to pass along 3 decks, and I am going to keep 1 deck because it turns out I really like the Flow Tarot. I just had to give it a chance. Well, thanks for stopping by.